Today I'll be comparing Thermal Master P2 Pro with FLIR One Pro thermal cameras. According to the specs, Thermal Master looks like a much better camera, but I prefer to compare the real-world usability. For example, Thermal Master claims to be within 2 degrees Celsius in terms of temperature accuracy, but neither of these cameras are exceptionally accurate. If you need accurate temperature measurement, you would use a thermocouple. Thermal resolution is a much better metric in my opinion. So can the camera tell two objects apart that are very close in temperature to each other? For example, if you're doing an inspection and need to see which parts of the room aren't insulated properly, or which part of the circuit board is overheating and where there is a faulty component. These are much more realistic uses for the cameras. Here's everything that comes in the box with Thermal Master. You have the lightning extension cable, the USB-C to lightning adapter, there's a macro lens, which will be important later, and of course the main camera body. Macro lens attaches magnetically. The camera itself is pretty small. I wish there was some kind of case that came with it. Now, full disclosure, I received the camera for free, but I'm not being paid for the review, and if I decide to keep the camera, I will buy it with my own money. FLIR, on the other hand, is much more minimalistic. You have the camera, the charging cable, and the carrying case. The first test I did was just walking outside the building. It was about minus 20 degrees outside, and here you can clearly see that windows leak the most heat from the building, but this is why I mentioned that looking at specs alone is not enough. You can see the cold reading is jumping around between 26, 30 something degrees, when in reality it's about minus 20. And as you can see, FLIR is showing a similar picture. You have the most heat escaping from the windows. The temperature varies quite a bit. One thing that I noticed with FLIR though is because of the auto ranging, it's setting the colors automatically and it jumps around quite a bit, which is a bit distracting. And if you're preparing a video for a report, it might not be the best experience. Both cameras are very useful for interior inspections. For example, this is Thermal Master camera. It's showing my footsteps where I was standing, and it's clearly showing where drywall is attaching to the wood directly without any insulation behind it, so you can see the cold spots. I like the fact that it shows small temperature differences, so you can know where you need to insulate or add more insulation if it's missing. And once again, FLIR is showing a similar picture, although you cannot distinguish joists in the floors because of the lower resolution. And also, as you may have noticed, because of the smaller sensor, it has a smaller field of view, so you'd have to step back a little in order to get the same larger image as Thermal Master. The image is also a bit more blurry. The window covering is made out of metal, which is reflective to infrared light. This is why it looks like there's a hot spot above the window. Another very practical use for these cameras is inspecting floor heating. So for example, here you can see these two wires are pretty close together, which creates hot spots and in severe cases could lead to a fire. And you get similar results with FLIR, although the hotspot might look a bit more exaggerated than it is. And here I wouldn't worry about it. Maybe if the wires were crossing, then I'd be concerned. Next, I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of a faulty PCB inspection. I have a circuit board that overheats, so I plugged it in and you can see the hotspot appearing rapidly. Thanks to dynamic imaging, FLIR shows outline of the components, although they're not usually aligned perfectly. And again, here you can see the reflectivity of metal in infrared light. Even the PCB is acting like a mirror. At this point, I put the macro lens on the Thermal Master camera, and you can see the outlines of each of the components. And because this is not an overlaid visual image, this is the actual position. Here I was holding the camera about 10, maybe 15 centimeters away from the board. For the next test, I wanted to do a temperature accuracy comparison. So the soldering iron is set to 230 degrees, but its actual temperature is slightly lower. By the way, as I mentioned, here you can see the misalignment and FLIR between the image and the actual object. For this test, I set emissivity of both cameras to 0.6, which should account for the semi-gloss finish of the soldering iron tip. One downside of Thermal Master you can see here is their hotspot tracking is a bit lagging behind the image. For reference, this is the actual temperature of the soldering iron tip. For low temperature accuracy comparison, I'm just holding the thermocouple, and Thermal Master is within 2 degrees, just as advertised. For some reason, FLIR decided I'm filming vertically, so it flipped the labels, but the temperature accuracy is within 3 degrees. And I think this is the biggest advantage of high-resolution thermal camera. You can actually see my arm hair as colder lines. Since the primary function of body hair is to trap heat, I'd say it's working. This is done with automatic ranging. I didn't have to change any settings. This is the absolute best image I could get from FLIR after tweaking the ranges manually. And judging by this, I'm a hairless Mexican. Let's switch gears for a minute and compare the app functionality. If you want any hope of getting within a ballpark of the correct temperature, eventually you'll need to adjust emissivity when measuring different materials. To do this in Thermal Master, you have to go to Home Screen, Setting, Temperature Setting, Variable Correction, Add Custom Mode, and manually type in the correct emissivity. Then hit Confirm. Then go back through the menus to the home screen, select Camera. If you had any points or regions created, you now have to recreate them again. With FLIR, the process is a bit shorter. You go to Settings, Emissivity, you pick whichever is the right one, and then you go back to the home screen and exit. The hot and cold tracking cursors are back where they were. Manual temperature range can be set to any value on FLIR, and it can be useful if you know roughly the temperature of the object you want to monitor, and you just want to note small temperature differences. On Thermal Master, there are only 2 temperature ranges that you can manually select, and you cannot enter any other values. Alright, now I'll quickly go over the pros and cons for each of the camera. So Thermal Master cons. Adjusting emissivity is cumbersome. The app doesn't remember the last setting, so for example rotation, created regions, and so on. It saves photos and videos to the app and not to the phone's photo album, although this could be a pro depending on your use case. It always records in portrait mode, so you have to rotate the video in post-processing. Even though the labels are rotated, the actual video itself is always in portrait. The cursor lags behind the hot and cold spot when moving, and the cursors themselves are pretty small, so it's a bit harder to see if you have a busy screen. Now onto the pros. It has very high resolution and frame rate, so you can discern small details. It has a macro lens included, which is very nice for PCB work and other fine detailed work. It has temperature alarms, which can be useful. A small thing, it pops up a prompt to download the app when you connect the camera to your phone for the first time, and it comes with the extension cable and a USB-C to Lightning adapter. You can buy both of those separately, but it's just nice to have them included. Now onto FLIR. It has lower resolution and frame rate. It requires microphone permission to record. I have no idea why. When it's disconnected and turned off, the battery still drains, so if you need to use it urgently, you may not be able to. It can take up to 40 seconds to connect the camera, sometimes even longer. It can record in portrait and landscape mode, but it's inconsistent. As one of the videos I was showing, it was for some reason stuck in portrait mode even though the phone was horizontal. Now the pros. It has dynamic imaging, so it overlays the visible image over the thermal, so it can be useful sometimes, although you have to adjust the alignment manually. It has large cursors that follow hot and cold spots as fast as the frame rate allows. It saves the videos and photos to the phone photo album, You can manually set temperature ranges within 1/10 of a degree, and it comes with a carrying case, which is a nice touch. So what's the conclusion here? Well, both cameras are pretty close in terms of their features and usability, but FLIR app user experience, in my opinion, is quite a bit better than Thermal Master, although Thermal Master has superior hardware. So given the price difference, I think Thermal Master offers a much better value. So if you're buying a new camera and deciding which one to choose, I would go for Thermal Master. Now, if you already have FLIR thermal camera and don't need the higher resolution and the frame rate, I wouldn't spend the extra 300 or 350 that the Thermal Master costs to get those extra features. Unless you had your FLIR camera for a few years now and the battery is starting to go, then I would upgrade. I included affiliate links to both cameras in the description, but based on what Honey has been doing, I don't think I'll see a penny of it.